Hello, everyone. I thought it was time to go into a little more depth on what we're doing on the evaluation proposal project, which you're working on in your groups. I'd like to go over, first of all, where the materials are located for this. So I'm right now in eCampus, and I'm in the student view. So I'm going to scroll down. I'm looking in the course materials area, and I'm going to scroll down to week 8. And the materials for the evaluation proposal submission, the assignment portal, and the guidelines, and the blog where you all have been sharing your ideas are all located in the week 8 folder. I thought it would be helpful to also put together a specific project rubric so that you could see, based on the guidelines that have been provided, how does this translate into how the projects will be reviewed? So I did put together a rubric for that, and it is posted here. I like to share things with you in both Excel and a print-friendly version. Sometimes it's nice to just print the rubric and have it as kind of a guide that you look at. And the print-friendly version is a PDF version of the rubric. So what I'd like to do is just kind of walk through the materials that are here and make sure that they're all clear to you. So the first thing we'll do is we'll look at the guidelines. The guidelines you've seen for a while. They were distributed a while ago. Most of you have posted to the blog as a group and completed the preliminary sharing for your projects, and that was based on this: your title, sharing the logic model for the project you've chosen to work on, and then there have been a few questions about, well, what do I mean by evaluation framework? That really refers to what theoretical or research model that you're using. Most of you, again, have got your head around this and are looking in the book and selecting and comparing different research models. And then this also asks for a short description of stakeholders, which is the readers of your evaluation. And I'm going to talk about stakeholders a little bit more in this video. And then I'd like you to include with your project a description of the team roles. And so your blog post was due by March 2nd, the draft by March 14th, and then the 21st, the final project. And here's suggestions for evaluation roles. And I like some of you have shown that you don't just have one role. I really like that, because I think everybody should be involved in research and gathering materials for your project. That really gets you all engaged in exploring what you're going to do and how you'll handle this. I thought it would be helpful to take a minute and just talk a little bit more about, well, what do we mean by stakeholders? Because this is a term that can mean a lot of different things. Project stakeholders are entities that have an interest in your program evaluation project. Stakeholders may be inside or outside the organization which sponsor a project. These may be your funders, which are not in the program, they're outside the program. They could be an entity which has an interest or something to gain from a successful completion of a project. It could be a government agency. Or they could be that they're an entity that may have a positive or negative influence on the project completion. Depending on what your project is, it could be that this entity is the school board, or it could be the city planning commission, a community organization, or, like I said before, another government agency. So this is a list of examples of project stakeholders. The project leader, the project team members, senior management, project customers, resource managers, line managers, product user group, they can be your stakeholders, your project testers, any group impacted by the project as it progresses, any group impacted by the project when it is completed, subcontractors to the project, consultants to the project. So in this case, we are defining stakeholders as the primary audience for your program evaluation. Because the stakeholder group can be so broad, I'd really like to narrow it down for when I ask for who's going to read this program evaluation, and that may be hypothetically. Maybe you're doing an evaluation which is hypothetical, or maybe you really are working with a group and you are going to have them read it. So that gives you a little more of a target group when I talk about stakeholders in this context. Okay, the next thing I'd like to do is just open up the rubric. Like I said, it is based on the guidelines, but I think we need to go a level deeper in detail so that you can really see, well, if this is worth 15 points, how are the points broken up? And what are you expecting? What am I expecting as I read it and grade it? And what are your expectations as a group as you pull it together? So this is the Excel version of it. And I've been using these headers, which have been suggested in a rubric professional development course I took, and I noticed they're also used in eCampus as one of the options. I added this one, not evident. If there's a case where there's just no, this criterion was overlooked, or there's no evidence at all, we need this category. Sometimes you've got the beginning of something, so it's almost there, and that's why you're submitting drafts. So you do have a chance to share it with other groups, get some feedback from me, and revise it. Competent, it's pretty well done. You understand the message, but proficient is it is exactly done in the fullest definition of the context, and that's a criterion that would be worthy of full credit. So this is broken down into a couple categories here. When you submit it, I want to make sure you have your evaluation proposal title, the list of the group members and their roles. You have shared this in the blog, but I'd also like this to be included in what you submit. And there is a half a point value for that. Then this section, the program evaluation background, this I really think a lot of it can come from incorporating data collected from the groundwork interview, the groundwork project, which for some of you was more than an interview. You did some research and exploration on your project as part of that, which I really was pleased to see. So the background section is a condensed summary of what you gathered for the groundwork. And these are the questions that were used in the groundwork assignment. So you can split up the work for this summary, or it can be the person who is your copy editor, your writer who pulls this together. And this just shows that what you did for the groundwork has value for the evaluation. And you may want to supplement it. Maybe there are some missing holes, or you found out some more information beyond what was in the groundwork. That's certainly a great starting point for your background. And I also wanted to reinforce for you that having these as initial questions is also reinforced in the book. So this is a really good way to start, and it's consistent with what we're learning from our book. Now here, when we get to the next level, I've also put in here some tips for things to refer to in the book. And let's take a look. One of the things I put here was table 1.2. And there's an explanation of each of the items in table 1.2 on pages 27 to 35 of your book. So let's take a minute and look at that. Table 1.2. This is kind of a checklist of key questions and steps in conducting an evaluation feasibility assessment. Now, in putting together the evaluation proposal, these seem like very appropriate guidelines. So, and it also was consistent with what I asked you to think about when you put this together. Some of the wording is just a little bit different, but I refer you to this table for further explanation, and the page numbers are on the rubric where you'll find it. But we're going to be looking at these questions using pretty much the wording that I gave you, but this follows this criteria very closely. Now we'll go back here to the rubric. Some of the questions asked are, who are the clients for the evaluation? You haven't really asked that yet. The clients and the stakeholders, there is some overlap, but they're not the same. As we talked about, stakeholders are a much broader term, and clients are really the people who are served by the program. I'd also like you to think about what are the questions and issues driving the evaluation. And for help with this question, I think table 1.1, which is on page 18 of your textbook, and then each of the items listed are further explained on pages 18 to 23. So let's look at this table 1.1. Possible evaluation questions. What is the need for a program? And the question was asked, is the program relevant? I felt that you also need to think about, how is it relevant? Was the structure logic of the program appropriate? Was the program implemented as intended? Was the program technically efficient? And to see exactly what that means, number 5 is further explained in the textbook. Was the program responsible for the outcomes that actually occurred? That is a tricky thing with evaluation, because we can't, most of the time, we cannot do experimental designs. So we really are doing quasi-experimental or qualitative or time series studies. They're not perfect in eliminating all the other possible causes. But as we've read in chapters 3 and 5, they can do a pretty good job to support what you're trying to prove with the evaluation. Did the program achieve its intended objectives? Now that's what's going to be answered at the end of an evaluation, as well as these other questions. But these are the questions you want to think about as you're putting together your proposal. You want to devise a plan so that you have addressed these questions. Let's go back to the rubric. Okay, given the evaluation questions, what do you already know? So when you look at the questions and phrased as they're appropriate for you, you're going to be listing these in your proposal. Because when you do an evaluation proposal, you have a list of questions that the evaluation addresses that you and the funder agree upon. So given the questions, what do you already know? Because you've already done the groundwork interview, you've already started to see what data is available, you've already started to define who the clients are and what the stakeholders are. So you've already got some information, so you can begin to carve out, based on the history of the project, what you already know. Perhaps there's already a previous evaluation that you can build upon. What is the logic of the program? And here you've already got a logic model based on the program you picked. You may want to update it, or you may feel that it's good as is. But I would like you to include the logic model in the proposal and a narration to go with it. What kind of environment does the program operate in, and how does that affect the comparisons available to an evaluator? Now, again, these items are explained further in the book, and I give you the page numbers. But this is a really important issue for you to look at, because how can you carve out the environment where your evaluation has a causal impact versus other factors that are already going on in that context that you may have to consider, and you may have to see if you have any data about, either qualitative or quantitative data or historical data. What theoretical frameworks, and this is research designs, are desirable and feasible? What are your possible choices for your framework to use? And then what data sources are available and appropriate given the evaluation issues, program structure, and the environment in which the program operates. So you're considering the research models, then you're looking at what data you have available, given the evaluation questions and focus that you want to take, the program structure and the environment in which the program operates, and then considering those factors, considering all the issues raised, the points listed above, which evaluation framework, and that means strategy or research design, is most feasible and defensible. And then I'd like you to explain that. And then I'd like you to, as a group, to include at least 3 citations to show how this evaluation framework has been used successfully in other program evaluations. Your textbook can be one of these references. I think the textbook does a really good job at providing examples. It's also got a good list of references with each chapter. So you may find that maybe there's not a good sample in the textbook, but they've got some good references. Or maybe there is a very good sample in the textbook, and the textbook can be one of your references. But this is to push you out into the literature, to do some comparisons, and to see if anybody else has done anything similar. And I think you can see from the book, sometimes the context of the evaluation is different, but the research framework across studies is similar. Or you've got another case where you've got similar contexts, but they're using very different research models. And this is an area where it will be very good fodder for discussion in your group. And you're submitting a draft, you can submit something and keep thinking about it and get some feedback from other groups and also from me. And if you decide to make a change, that's okay. But I think some of you are going to feel like your choices are kind of limited, that it's pretty obvious what you have to do. So you're either going to do a mixed method, a qualitative or a quantitative study. And you're going to do a process evaluation, or you're going to do a summative evaluation. Or maybe you're going to do a time series study, which we've had some good readings about in the book. And the last criterion here is description of the stakeholders. And I want you to think about this as who you imagine is reading this evaluation. And that can be hypothetical or actual. But you're doing something that your group is really going to share. Of course, I'm reading it, and your group members are reading it, and your classmates are reading it. But based on the proposal, really, who would be the stakeholders reading this evaluation and describe them? So that's a breakdown of the points. And this gives you some examples to look at. I have one more visual I want to share with you. I'm somebody who I really enjoy looking at graphical things as I think, and so I also encourage you to look at figure 1.4. As you think through your plan, here's figure 1.4 is an open system model of programs and key evaluation issues. It's not a logic model. It's a way to think about your evaluation plan. Because the logic model may not be a perfect fit. And this is really sort of a thinking tool. Yes, this has a lot in common with what the logic models look like and what they contain. I just thought it may be a help to you to go ahead and have this model as a backdrop while your group is talking and putting together your proposal. And these all come from your book, and you notice I've gone back to chapter 1. Because one thing I noticed about the book is that chapter 1 was kind of like a simple version of telling the whole story about evaluation. And so, although there's really a lot of information in chapter 3 and chapter 5, and then you begin to get into more detail in chapter 4 and 6 and 7 onward from there. Chapter 1 really gives a high-level overview of evaluation. And to some sense, I thought it was some of these tables and graphics are nice to go back to because it's a simpler introduction to the story while you're getting your bearings, and I think in that regard it's useful. So you can see, let's go back to eCampus. Week 8 has the materials that you need to get going with your evaluation proposal, the guidelines, and now you have a detailed rubric to really help you create a more specific outline, and the place where you submit them. So I wanted to make this available to you. Your drafts will be coming in March 14th, and then your follow-up complete one on the 21st. So thank you very much. I hope this was helpful. Please feel free to email me anytime. Thank you.